Hey everyone, welcome to DoubleDM, the TTRPG talk show, where we talk about TTRPGs, game mastering, and everything adjacent under the sun. This week we discuss the important topic of session zeros and how to do them right. Obviously, a lot of people will have differing opinions on what makes a good session zero, but there are a few key points we think that are very important in creating a good session zero so you can start your next campaign in the best way possible and create even more amazing stories. Because yes, session zeros are very influential for a whole campaign as they cover a lot of different things like expectation management, safety tools, world and game discussions, and even character creation. You can mix and match these things in your session zeros all you want. In this episode, we will kind of talk about what we do, how we do them, and what is important for session zero in its concept. There's a lot to talk about today, so let's not waste any more time and let's chat about making your TTRPGs better with the perfect session zero.
Hello and welcome to DoubleDM episode 93. With me, as per usual, is my lovely co-host Emil. How are you doing today?
I am doing great.
Yeah, I figured.
No, it's a beautiful Thursday, and yeah, I got a lot of fun stuff to do this week, and I have fun stuff coming up.
Yeah, tell me about it. I want to hear about it.
Well, first of all, obviously on Monday we released our episode with Shelly and Greg from Dragon Talk, which was a great episode. It was amazing. Really loved that one.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this, well, last week's episode was great. And you should listen to that as well after you've listened to this episode. And yeah, Tuesday was pretty chill. No TTRPG session because we played on Monday. Yeah, that was Titan's Call. So we cannot go into detail of what happened. But from my point of view as the game master, it was pretty intense. All 4 hours of our recording session were pretty intense.
Hell yeah, it was one of the most intense sessions I had in a long time. Maybe even since the beginning of Titan's Call, of the first episode recording.
I think the first episode of Titan's Call wasn't that tense. First episode of Titan's Call is gonna be, I can tell that much, is more of a shock. But this episode didn't have shock. It had tension.
Yeah, it was a slow burning tension that only kept on going. It was amazing. It really was amazing. And I can tell you as a player, it was a lot of fun playing in that. I really, really enjoyed that.
But I will say such sessions burn me out really, really quick. So I had to crash after that one and was thankful like I hadn't to do anything on Tuesday. And yeah, yesterday we had my first 3 hours kendo session of the season. Right? Kendo is sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes only 1.5 hours for us, depending on when we do kendo. And since one of my friends, or one of the kendo friends I have, is going to a competition on Saturday, which I hope to attend as well, not to compete, but to cheer him on, we had to do a lot of combative training. We did a lot of techniques that are useful in fighting, like hitting twice instead of once, or countering attacks, or just being fast about it. And that can be tiring real quick. Normal kendo isn't as intense on your knees and legs as this was. And I'm still feeling the effects today. Oh yeah, really fucking hard.
Yeah, I still remember the training sessions at Kung Fu for right before a big tournament. This is just, it can be really brutal at some times.
But yeah, that was training. TTRPG wise, Niels, did you have any other sessions since we last recorded?
Not yet. I have one right after the recording today.
I have one as well today.
And it's basically just, or what do I mean by saying just? It's a role-playing and shopping episode, you could say. We finished one major arc, or the first arc of that campaign, and now have some free time at our hands and travel to one or to our next destination, and just arrived in a city. We don't have any quests in the city, you could say. There's nothing to do yet. but that might change. But we'll see how this turns out. But that's about anything specific TTRPG-wise this week. But after that, I'm going to the cinema to watch a movie.
Today as well? Damn, what movie?
Wakanda Forever.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I still have to see that one as well.
Yeah, I would have rather played some more TTRPGs. I'm not a big fan of going to the movies or going to the cinema. It's not my kind of jam. I'd rather later watch the movie with a couple of friends on my couch in my living room and eat whatever the fuck I want and not pay big bucks for some bits of popcorn. But I guess it's okay.
I guess it's okay.
Yeah, you know, if you meet up for, or if you make plans to play TTRPGs, and then you'd rather want to play TTRPGs, at least in my opinion.
I have to say that as for hobbies, TTRPG scratch obviously a certain itch. And cinema and going to the movies scratch a completely different itch. If I go to the movies, it's for basically shutting my brain off and having enjoyment blasted at me without much effort from my side. When in TTRPGs, I want to be active. And that's why, for example, I think that going to the movies, while obviously it doesn't have to be your favorite hobby or even a good hobby for you, is actually a good thing to do once in a while.
Yeah, most definitely.
With TTRPGs, right, just having kind of that hobby where you're more passive in your enjoyment, right? Because sometimes it's all you want. Sometimes you don't want to be an active player or sometimes a GM. Obviously, I can understand why playing TTRPGs is more fun for most people or for some people. But yeah, movies are fine.
Yeah, most definitely they are. But I've had my fair share of movies while I was sick the last week. So I just sat on the couch and watched some movies and didn't do anything major. Now that I'm mentally back in the driving seat, I'd rather play some TTRPGs. But yeah, I guess let's see how it turns out.
No, yeah. Well, have fun with that movie and with that TTRPG session. My session is gonna be a little bit more spicy, I think, because just last time we played, which then had to be, unfortunately, be cut off by another missed session last week, we split the party. And in the most epic way possible, because we were in a cave, there was a portal, and suddenly a lot of harpies came at us. 2 characters decided to instantly go into the portal to not fight the harpies. 2 characters decided to fight the harpies. Then those 2 got split again. The one that was still on the side of the portal also went through the portal then, and the other fought the harpies alone, won, and then ventured on into a snowstorm outside the cave. So 3 of us are somewhere outside of a portal, and 1 character is alone in a snowstorm.
That's a good premise. Being alone in a snowstorm.
We still don't know where we are going. We still don't know what is gonna happen, but we will see.
Yeah, let's hope for the best, right?
I mean, it's one of these amazing moments where TTRPGs are about decision making. And we were in this fight, we saw the harpies, and everyone made their own decision. The portal was open, there was a way to flee, and everyone made the decision, and then we announced them more or less at the same time. So there were some reactions to what other people did, but generally it was, okay, I'm going into the portal. Okay, you're going into the portal. I'm going into the portal as well. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight as well, I think, then. And like this was a moment where there wasn't really any table talk about it. It was just, okay, this is what I do. This is what happens. And it was a great moment.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love these moments, even though they might, suck a bit, because obviously splitting the party isn't the best option, just because it's a lot of work to work with 2 split parties to make sure that no one is having too much downtime and doesn't play their character, to make sure that everyone gets a fair chance and blah 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 blah, right? But it's just a good organic moment that happened in the story through what the circumstances were, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I usually try to avoid splitting the party, but if it happens, it happens, and then you'll just go with it. If it happens organically, there can be so many fun situations out of that party split, because then you get to play the way that your characters would without having all the information, because you don't have all the information. Because you're not at one point where the other characters are.
Yeah.
This can be a lot of fun, but it can also be really straining on everybody involved, especially the DM, to keep track of multiple locations at the same time.
Yeah.
I will say that much, but it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. for sure. So with that, I don't have any other TTRPG sessions this week. And if you don't have anything else to talk about,
Me neither.
we can jump into our episode about session zeros and especially how to do them right. Hey, dear listener, we arrived at this episode's mid-roll. I don't want to keep you too long in this break from the usual program, but podcasting overlords demand that I ask you to rate and review our show to help us expand our reach and get new listeners. But also with more reviews and ratings comes the benefit of us getting a better feel for what you like and dislike about the show, allowing us to improve our show to the next level just for you guys. And hey, if you really like the show, then recommend us to your friends so we can share our content with them and help them with whatever dungeon master dilemma or player problems they are having right now. I know you hear this all of the time, but really doing so helps shows like ours and any other podcaster, especially indie podcasters, out immensely in creating the best content possible. So again, rate, review, tell a friend or whatever works for you. If you are feeling super generous today, you can check out our Ko-Fi and donate a few bucks towards upgrading the show with new microphones, editing software, and studio surroundings. No pressure at all though, this is just if you feel like you want to help out. Lastly, I also want to tell you guys about our social media channels and that you can follow us on especially Twitter or Instagram to stay up to date with the show and get a whole slew of other content like memes, tips, and general shitposts about TTRPGs and the TTRPG industry or community. Thank you guys so much for your constant support of our show, and we hope we can continue creating amazing content for you guys well into the future. Oh, one last thing. If you have a TTRPG product you want to advertise on our show, contact us about affordable ad space on DoubleDM episodes, and we also have promo swap spaces available for other podcasters and shows. And with that, I have an advertisement for you, and after that, it's right back to the show. Do you want a lightweight, easy to use and free application for your tabletop role-playing campaigns? Master Screen is the ultimate set of tools for running tabletop or online role-playing campaigns and managing intricate fictional worlds as well. This incredible browser application can run on any device and also works offline so you can edit your files basically everywhere. This awesome campaign manager allows you to level up your notes and organization so you have to spend less time in your notes and more time in the action of your games. The focus on the simple yet beautiful design makes for great and intuitive use for every tabletop role-playing game, and as time goes on there will be even more features to create a one-stop get-all for game masters wanting to level up their game. And remember, all of that is for the low price of free and requires no downloads. So go to masterscreen.app to start becoming the master behind the screen you were meant to be. You can find the link in the description.
So, Emil, we are having hopefully an amazing session tomorrow. We are having a preparation for a new campaign we are starting.
Sure, yeah.
Our Cyberpunk campaign.
Yeah, we're finally playing Cyberpunk, and I am so excited that I finally get to play this system in particular. I've had it in a one-shot once, and I have been dying to have a campaign in it as well.
Yeah, I love the setting and I love all of it around it, but I haven't played the Cyberpunk rule set yet, so I'm excited to see where this is going and how all of this works. We are discussing tomorrow on Friday evening in a session 0, and I thought, why not talk about that in today's episode?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the process of doing our road to 100 episodes with this episode 93. We had 2 interviews, but we also had an episode on new players at the table and how to help them. And well, now is the perfect time to basically do the first thing with them. Have a session 0. Show them that there are boundaries respected, that they are safe, that they can have fun in the way they want to, and basically ease them into role-playing a bit. And I think session 0s help with that a lot.
Exactly. But not only do they help easing someone into roleplay and get them comfortable and get to know the group more or less, but also get to know the rule system, because that's something you should talk about in there as well. And how often do you play and all of that stuff. It's not just on the feeling, emotional side that you get them used to your group, but also on the game and mechanical side.
Yeah, I think what especially haters of the term Session Zero or safety tools often fail to realize is that a Session Zero is not just Generation Z or millennials or snowflakes, as they like to call them, talking about their feelings. That's a huge part of it, yes, but there's also a lot of discussion about rules, creating characters, discussions about the world, making sure everyone is on the same page.
Yeah. Especially with newer players, because when they don't know anything about a system, they want to know stuff about it. And especially a more in-depth rule thing is perfect to do before you start playing, actually.
Yeah. And yes, I would say that the most important part of a Session Zero is making sure that everyone is okay with the game played, is okay with everything happening, and safety tools have been discussed. And again, I think I've said this enough times, but this is not a podcast for you if you do not agree with that stance. Sure, I cannot make you not listen to this, but why would you listen to this podcast then? With that out of the way, Session Zeros, right? We said they are important and why they are important, but I think Session Zeros for me are kind of weird to start. I don't know where that comes from, but every time I start a normal TTRPG session, it's with a short catch-up of everyone's week. How are you doing, right? Come in. I don't know, how was your week? What did you do? Did you finally hand in your bachelor thesis or whatever? Stuff like that. And then I just do a recap of what happened last time, and then we start playing. That's easy. But in Session Zero, I obviously have nothing to recap. But how do I start a Session Zero? I think it's always an awkward moment for me, how to start a Session Zero, because we're all sitting there and like, okay, yeah, we know what to do. We know what to do here, but how do we start?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I have this feeling that when I start a Session Zero, that it kind of feels like I'm going to do a lecture on the system and on the game we are about to play. But then when we get into the Session Zero, actually, it doesn't feel like that at all. It's just a feeling beforehand, like, okay, I'm going to talk now for a bit and the others are going to listen. And that's something that you need to think about, or that you should keep in mind, that this is not going to be a lecture that you hold for your players, but it's a dialogue between everyone playing at that game to get to know each other, get to know the system and everything in between, and the rule set that you want to play with as a game rule set and as a table rule set that you all decide on, because table etiquette is a thing that you should do, that you should talk about.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing in person, how to behave and what everyone is comfortable with and whatnot. And then it's not a lecture, it's more of a dialogue between friends or players.
Yeah, I think that the first point of order in a Session Zero for me is always kind of get everyone comfortable. However we do that as a group, right? For example, if not everyone knows each other in the group, which can be a thing that happens, right? If you're just playing with a group of friends you've played with for a long time, you can obviously skip this step. But the first step for me, if not everyone knows each other well, is to have kind of this introductionary game. Not necessarily a game like you would play in school or college or wherever, where you kind of had these awkward games to get to know each other, where someone throws the ball around and then asks a question, everyone has to answer it or whatever the fuck. Not that. We're a group of people, probably like 3 to 7 people. We can just talk as a group about something. We don't have to ask weird questions like, what's your favorite anime? It doesn't necessarily matter for the TTRPG we're about to play, but I don't know. Who are you? Name, where do you come from or whatever, right? What are you studying? As most of my groups are students, what are you studying or where do you work or something like that? Just simple things, right? Just get a conversation going somehow. It can be awkward, yes, but you need to have at least some sort of familiarity with the people you're playing with to actually discuss the important parts of a Session Zero, like safety, but also how to handle rules, especially homebrew, for example. Because if you disagree on that sort of stuff, you need to find a common ground. And you do that way easier if you at least know the person a bit.
Exactly. It just feels easier for everyone at the table to talk with each other.
Yeah.
When they at least know a bit about each other. When you're just a complete stranger in any setting, it kind of feels awkward to talk at first. But when you get that first awkward talking out of the way, then you can instantly or more easily get into the more important, in quotation marks, stuff. Because getting to know each other is important, obviously, to get to that phase. But for that game that you're about to play, more important things to be discussed, like safety tools, rules, homebrew, all of that, it is way easier if you know each other at least a bit.
I mean, the thing is, right, everyone has been at a party or a social gathering before where they were kind of the odd one out. And like the one friend you have just left to the bathroom and now you're sitting there with like 5 strangers and like, hi, I don't know, nice weather outside, right? And that's normal for humans. We hate things that are unknown to us, that are uncommon to us. That's just human nature. And you just get that out of the way by having that weird conversation in the beginning. And yes, it might be awkward, but it's best to have that because it's better than to go to something that is in quotation marks more important before without knowing the person you're sitting in front of.
Exactly.
Right? The person doesn't have to confess anything to you or tell you something private or something or secrets, but at least knowing their name, kind of where they come from, who they are, what they do in life and stuff like that, how they got into TTRPGs, for example, or kind of how they play TTRPGs might be very interesting if you're having a session 0 for a TTRPG.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a general vibe check to see if the vibe of the group fits, because this is also a very important thing. If you don't fit into that group, it doesn't make sense to play there.
Yeah. If at this step you already realize that this group isn't for you, which can be the case, leave.
Exactly. It's no problem. No one will front you for that.
Especially if you're upfront about it. Obviously, if you just leave, yeah, sure, some people might feel weird about it. But if you just say, hey, I already know this group isn't for me. I'm a very heavy role player and the rest of you seems to enjoy combat alone. And I don't want to take away combat from you guys, but I know that I don't enjoy combat at all. So I might just leave. I'm sorry, but I know this is the best decision for both sides. Bye-bye. Don't have to do anything else with the group. If you know you have one general thing for session zeros is if you realize at any given point in the session 0 or in the campaign thereafter that this group isn't for you, you owe no explanation to anyone. You do not have to make up an apology. You can just leave.
Exactly. But I think talking about that you're leaving is still important.
Yeah.
But the not just leaving and ghosting the group, but saying, hey, this group isn't for me.
Yeah.
That's
but
about
you don't
it.
have to make up any reasons
Exactly.
for it. You can just say, hey, not working out for me. I'm sorry. Bye-bye.
Exactly.
And a good GM and good players will respect that.
Exactly.
They will accept it and move past it. If you're friends and you say, hey, I'm not cut out for this. I'm sorry. I'm gonna leave. Your friends won't hold a grudge against you for doing that. They will support you in doing that. If they're good friends, they should and will do that. Okay, so talked about the beginnings and how it's kind of awkward, but especially the most important part, leaving is okay. And session zeros are for the general vibe check of the group. Finding a common ground so everyone can have fun together. If that is not a given, it's not gonna be a fun table.
Exactly.
Okay, so with that out of the way, where do we move next? What comes next? Not necessarily in a chronological sense, but what is the next thing in a session 0 for you?
Usually, I would call them the essentials, like what type of game we are playing, what vibe you want to go for in that game, what system you are playing, and your safety tools that you will use. I think these are the most important things to talk about. The rest is then more of fluff and small little details, you could say, that are not unimportant, but not as important as these factors. Yeah.
I think one general thing is that I can mix around a lot of stuff in my session 0s, but two things. The introduction at the beginning and character creation at the end for me. Because when I create a character, I want to know a lot of different things about the game, the world, and the genre we are playing. Those things haven't been discussed yet. But also, if I create a character, for me at least, it feels kind of like a commitment to a game. And as we just discussed, if at any point during a session 0 you want to leave, you should leave. Creating a character beforehand kind of binds you to the campaign more than a session 0 just does. So for me, this character creation is the end of a session 0 because my players have all the information they should have about the campaign. They know the system now, and they can create a character in it. And after they created a character, they kind of have a commitment for the game. And when that commitment comes before a point where they then decide to leave, they might think, okay, I cannot leave. I've already created a character with this group. I don't want to leave anymore. And that's a deadlock. And I don't want that to happen. So that's why that always comes last for me. So what, however, often comes for me second is, since most of my groups decide on the system we're playing before we even have a session 0, I know some people have that in their session 0s. And that is totally fine. We don't do it. We decide that beforehand with the group we want to play with. But that's just us. But when we have a system, right? Because most systems do not do every genre well. They do one or maybe two well. Those are the genres this thing plays. For example, Cyberpunk, which we've had a session 0 on already when this episode releases. is a cyberpunk genre. What a surprise. So I put in some research and effort to find out what cyberpunk in its essence means. Because without that essence, we cannot play this game. We cannot play a story in this genre. Because if we do not know what cyberpunk means, we will miss the point entirely the game tries to convey with its rules or its setting. And we need to know that before we even discuss those things. This is more of a fluff thing and can be omitted if your setting is very, very normal for people to grasp. But especially for cyberpunk, it's a complex genre. It's not just people on the streets shooting with cyberware. It's a lot about capitalism, right? Opposing capitalism. And that a cyberpunk hero can never be a capitalist. It is impossible for them to be part of the system they are opposed against.
Yeah.
Sure, they might be still part of the system in some way because they have to survive. But at its essence, a cyberpunk character cannot be supporting capitalism or cannot be supporting the big corporations that are the embodiment of capitalism in this world. You cannot play that game that way.
Yeah, and I think this is also to the essentials part. I would put that there together with type of game and system for me, because I usually decide with my groups on a system before session 0 as well.
Yeah.
But when we decided that, what type of game we want to play in that system, that is fit for that game system. Like, for example, if you decide on D&D, obviously it's going to be a fantasy setting, but what type of fantasy? And then more of a subgenre idea, if it's going to be more action focused or not, or more story or magic, tech, or whatever. This is also something that I would usually discuss at this stage.
Yeah.
To get everyone on the same page of what we are all going for as a group.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if I don't get the essence right for that system, the game wouldn't be or won't be enjoyable as well. And you can then dive deeper into that by then, for example, calling that genre, then using subgenres or multiple genres to specify what type of game you want to play.
Yeah, but I think it's very important as a GM to understand the game you're playing. Not the system or the world, but the game you're playing, right? You're playing a game in a TTRPG, and this game is designed in a special way. And you need to understand that because, again, the cyberpunk system is designed to handle cyberpunk stories well. The D&D system is designed to handle epic fantasy games very well. While I will say it's not impossible because, for example, Planet Arcana is a D&D podcast that does futuristic D&D. It's possible, but it's, at least for me, not my preferred style of D&D. When I want to play sci-fi, I wouldn't choose D&D. I still respect Planet Arcana very fucking much. They are very good. They create a great story and a great podcast, and it's their right to do D&D sci-fi because it's good. But generally, the system doesn't necessarily handle it that well. But they obviously did a lot of work building with D&D as a system in mind, and that is more important. Respect the system you're playing in your session 0 to actually get the enjoyable game, because if you're already in session 0 basically speaking about tweaking the game in all the wrong places to the wrong things, yeah, you might still be having fun, but you will have a lot more fun if you would choose a different system that does the things you already want to do.
Exactly.
Right? If in my cyberpunk game you all would say we want to be, I don't know, a strike team from Arasaka, I would say no, that's not important. That's literally impossible, because the spirit of this game is not to support Arasaka. Sure, you could all be a strike team from Arasaka that has been wronged and has since then turned against them. But I will not let you guys be a group of enforcers for the thing that the game wants you to destroy.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work that way. That would create a divide between the game we chose to play and the game we want to play. And that divide needs to be minimal or not there at all. And that's why in a session 0 we need to talk about this sort of stuff. I need to know what games you guys want, what games we are having, and how we can make sure that we are actually playing to the core elements of the game and the genre and the world and stuff like that, while still honoring the wishes we have. Sometimes that means we need to switch the system. Sometimes that means we need to change the world. Sometimes that means we need to change genre and with that game and world. But we need to make sure that everything fits together. And that's, for me, the second biggest part after safety and communication. Why is session 0 zero is always needed.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, we will have a divide in everything. And that divide will keep us from having the most fun we could. And we all want fun. So why don't we do this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have something that kind of relates to that. I had a session 0 for my Halloween one-shot, a special one, because this was more of a Eldritch horror one-shot.
Yeah.
And we played D&D because we backed a supplement, a Kickstarter project that made a D&D version of some Eldritch horror themes, mechanics, and we had the playtest material for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we discussed what we have to change on our world to fit that, what we want to play. And this is exactly why we needed another session 0, because it was the same group that I as a player play in, and in another game I GM for. So we know what goes and what doesn't, but we didn't have any clue as a group how we wanted to play this world.
Mm-hmm. So
we had to do another session 0 for exactly that reason. And another reason why I did the session 0, and is something that you mentioned already, is safety tools. Especially for, in my case, horror genre, the safety tools are so fucking important to get everyone on the same page of being comfortable at the table. And yeah, we are playing a horror game, but you're still in a safe place. And therefore, you need to discuss safety tools. You need to discuss what can be a topic in this game, what can't be a topic, how far you can go in these topics, and don't treat it as, oh, I spoil everything for my players because I tell them what type of thing we are going to experience. But that's complete and total bullcrap.
That's one of the very fun things for me about this argument, right? You're spoiling something. Wait, am I spoiling something? I'm just making sure that I'm taking the things away that they don't want to see.
Exactly.
I still have a lot of tools at my disposal, right? For the Cyberpunk game, I've sent around in Google documents with the lines and veils for us.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, I think, 20 distinct horror things written down there with a field of, if there's anything not mentioned, please mention it here. And that gives us 20 set points of horror, of which maybe 3 or 4 be omitted because people say I don't want that. That's still 16 different horror things I can use. How am I spoiling my players by saying them that's only 20% of the things I told them that could maybe happen that they don't want to happen? That's still 80% of the horror I could do just set by this document that I can do.
Exactly.
How is that spoilering?
It isn't. That's the thing. It isn't. You're just making sure that everyone can feel safe no matter what you're going to talk about, because they know I put that on, for example, on put a red dot there, this is completely off limits, then everyone knows this won't be a part of it. So they can just enjoy the game as it's meant to be enjoyed to its fullest without being or having the fear of, is my fear coming into play here or not? Because you can still create horror without having to go against the player's wishes from the session 0 and from the safety tools.
Yeah, right. That's kind of the thing for me. One thing I want to say about safety tools is make it anonymous, because especially if your group doesn't know each other that well, like we talked about in the beginning, it might be hard for someone to talk about their trauma or talk about their fears. Making it anonymous, even for you, the GM, is the best way. And every one of us can use Google Forms, Google document. Just make an anonymous Google form, and you will just have an overview of what has been marked as red, green, or yellow. You do not need to know who did that, but the players will have the option to say, this is what I marked red. The GM should follow up with me privately on this. And when I have a session 0, I look at the sheet and go through it with my players without them knowing who put what. And when I see something that is yellow, I, for example, say, okay, this is yellow. I will make sure that this is not included at most points, but can still happen through circumstances, or it might be a minor plot point. When something is red, I will say it is omitted. If the person that has put the yellow or red in there wants to clarify why they did that, they are welcome to do so. But they are more than welcome to just sit there in silence and let me say, this is how it will happen. I will make sure that this is not something that happens a lot or often or hardly, but it might happen, or it might not just happen at all when it is red. And they do not need to clarify what they meant with that. But if they want to, they can. But only if they want to. And that's the most important part. That's so important here. You need to give the people the ability to communicate, but the choice of staying silent.
Exactly.
And respect that choice.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're all here to have fun. And you can't have that if you're feeling unsafe or uncomfortable in any given situation.
Yeah.
And for that, you need to have the option to speak up or be silent if you want to do so, or have the knowledge that none of the topics that are not for you come up.
Yeah, one other thing for me for safety tools, for example, is in my consent sheet, I also have a box that says, is there content you want explicitly seen or what you want explicitly have in the game? Where people can put in their own, okay, I also definitely want to see this, or I definitely, for example, for Cyberpunk, I definitely want to see cyberpsychosis. Now, if someone else puts cyberpsychosis in the red, I will talk to the player that said, I want this definitely seen, and the player that doesn't want it seen at all, either privately or together, however both they see it fit, respecting their boundaries, about how to get both worlds. Because we will not have cyberpsychosis, but we can talk about why does the one player want cyberpsychosis and why does the one player don't want cyberpsychosis. And if they don't want cyberpsychosis because of some concept or implications, then those can fall away, but generally cyberpsychosis is fine for them. They just don't want the implications of it. And then we can just omit the implications if they are fine with it. And if the other player says, I just want the concept of it to be seen, then we can also just only see the concept of it in a different way. That is fine for all. And it's this point where it's all about communications. It's all about making sure that everyone is once again at a common ground. And the common ground is not just we all want to play a game. Common ground is we all want to play this game together in this environment and stuff like that. It's a lot more than just saying we want to play a game together. While it is true, it is omitting a lot of different things that are needed for it to be true.
And I think going away from safety tools now, because I think we talked at length about why we are a big fan of those and why you should use them, is another thing to talk about in session 0, I think, are organization stuff, more on the technical side again, like when are you playing, how often are you playing, how long, and all of those things. These are also important to know when before you start actually playing the campaign, to see if the time investment that you all decided on is something that you want to sign up for or can sign up for. If you say we are playing every second day and you don't have the time to do that, that's something that you need to know before you say, I want to be part of that group.
Yeah, it's very important to discuss these organizational things. They sound boring and they could be handled in an email or text message. I will not lie, but it's easier to just talk it out.
Exactly.
How long are game sessions gonna be? Do we have a break mid-session? When are we gonna play? Which days is everyone free, right? Do you have a rough schedule for your weeks? Can you give me some day where we're all always free so we can just pin that down for this campaign? Are we playing irregularly or regularly or semi-regularly, right? Different things. Maybe we're just playing every other month or so. And that might be something where people are like, well, then I cannot really get into character and the world, so I don't see the point of doing this. I would like to play more regularly. And that is respectable.
Exactly.
But at the same time, if someone doesn't have the time to do it more regularly than that, that's also something that you need to know. And if that is discussed, you can all agree to a plan. Sure, if someone cannot make it once or twice, everyone understands that you're sometimes late or work is holding you up or there's a family thing that comes up, no big problem. But in this instance, you should also discuss ways of communication. You already have one, talking to each other. But how do you substitute that? If you're, for example, playing in person, do you have a Discord or WhatsApp or Telegram group where you talk to each other? Are there open ways of communication with a GM at basically all times? Which is something I think is very important. You as a GM, where the ways of communication are probably always open, you need to make that known to your players that they can send you text messages at every given point in time about the game you're playing, or their characters, or the world. You might not respond instantly, but at one point I realized this because one of my players said it like this. I never knew that I was able to just annoy you with questions I have during the week when I have the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, obviously you have, but I never made that clear to them because they thought they would be annoying me by asking about my games.
Yeah.
And while this might be a minor thing, I think it's also a very minor thing to just say, and by the way, you can always message me about the game.
Exactly.
With everything I will be respecting and understanding. That is literally 1 or 2 sentences you need to say. That is not taking away any time as well. So you can just say it.
Exactly. And then just adding, I might not be able to respond because of life situations that happen. That's also completely fine, but still something that you need to convey to your players or to the whole group, just to be on the safe side, so no one feels left out because you didn't message them right away, but you said I can message you anytime. Yeah, that doesn't exactly mean that I will be able to answer instantly, or sometimes a question needs some thinking over, and then I just get back to you when I have the answer right. But before we play the next time, that's still something that you need to discuss beforehand.
Yeah, for freaking sure. One other big thing for me in session zeros is expectation management. We kind of talked about it on a game sense, on a frame of play sense, but not in a game sense or concept sense, because I want to know what you want from the game. I want to know what you don't want from the game. That's safety tools or also expectation management. But I want to know exactly where you're at and what you're expecting from the game, from the world, from the system, from the whole concept, from the group, from yourself, and from me as a game master. I want to just ask these questions. They do not have to be answered explicitly with exact wishes or things that need to be written down. But having these questions, okay, what do you expect from yourself in this game, gets people thinking about what they want to do. The answer, I just want to play my character, isn't the valid answer for me, but I always wanted to try to play a character that is very distinct from the characters I usually play, is a very good answer, because you're coming out of your comfort zone. And that's the important part. I want to come out of my comfort zone. I want to have more combats in this game. Is also a very good answer to the question, what do you want from the game?
No, I want to stick with a voice that I want to try out for this new character and not change it every fucking session. But
yeah, it can be as explicit as that, or just as ambiguous as I just want to do something different this time. That is ambiguous. I will not lie, but it's just, these questions aren't necessarily for good answers, but to get people thinking and talking.
Yeah, and get the concept across of the general idea of what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's not more of you don't need explicit things, just so you can all go into the direction of that concept that you all want to explore.
Yeah,
whatever concept it might be or how explicit it might be, but you still need to know what concepts they are that should be explored for you all to work on the same side to explore exactly these concepts that have been mentioned in the session zero beforehand.
Yeah, I think expectation management kind of comes from safety tools, and most of the time I put expectation management either before or after safety tools, depending on, I don't know, the mood. I don't know if people have this, have rigid views on the session zeros, or they just go with the flow, because I mostly go with the flow and the feeling I have right at the moment.
Same.
Because sometimes I think, okay, now it would be important for this game, especially for horror games, I want to discuss safety earlier on.
Yeah.
For less horror-y games, but just the way I GM, most of the time there will still be some scares or maybe some suspense in some way. I will still discuss it, but maybe later on. Maybe after I've talked about the world or something. But generally, it always comes rather early or at the middle, but never later than that.
Yeah.
But I just go with the flow in all different directions where it takes me.
Exactly. And most of the time I get from one thing to another, back to the first thing, and then circling back. It kind of, if you write it down, it would look like a mess, but
session zero is a conversation. Right. It's a conversation. Exactly. And sometimes that jumps back to a different topic or jumps between topics, especially if you have a group of full ADHD people. It jumps all over the place. But that's fine. It's a natural discussion. And that is what you want. You don't want to have this checklist necessarily, right? It's good to know that you're talking about all the important things, but you just want to talk. You just want to get accustomed to each other. You want to get the feeling. You want to vibe check, and you want to understand the other people to get a common ground. And that is done best by just a natural flow of conversation.
Yeah, and the order in which you do that really doesn't matter, as long as you talk about the important points at some point.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to also talk about different individual smaller topics than concepts and things like, for example, death is a very big thing for me in my sessions. How are you feeling about death? For example, for me, that is part of the safety tool discussion, because on my consent sheet, there's always a box about death. And when that comes up and I'm at that point in the discussion, I will ask everyone, okay, how do we deal with death as well, right? If you die, because in the safety tools, it says that you're all okay with death. But what happens when you die? Do you create a new character? How do we do that? And sometimes that obviously depends on the circumstances in the game you're having, but you can also discuss it out of game. Because after having now been part of 2 TPKs as a player, gladly never as a game master yet, TPKs are one of the best things to happen and one of the worst things to happen to a campaign.
Yeah.
I love them. I love the ending to to a story of dying. I really do. It's a cool ending, especially for TTRPGs where I can explore this in a safe space of having the main character or my character dying in a story. But also, they are very unsatisfying as an ending sometimes. They can be very unsatisfying, and that is something that should be discussed. What do we do in a case of a TPK? Do we restart a campaign? Do we just stop the story there? Do we revive you all in hell? Right? We talked about this in the revamp of our death episode, where we had the TPK just happen, and there we were enamored by how cool the TPK was, and I still am. But at the same time, I'm sitting here feeling death is just sometimes the most unsatisfying way a story can end. But at the same time, sometimes it is the most satisfying way. And because of this divide, once again, it's something that you need to talk about.
Exactly. And another thing that people might consider a smaller thing would be not just the system rules, but the homebrew rules that isn't stated in the setting book itself or in the campaign book or system book itself, because the system rules everyone can read up if they need to, but the homebrew rules that you as a group decided on should be decided on as a group and not by a single individual. Because if you, for example, in D&D want to do these improved criticals, and it might be a standard practice in 4 of your 5 players, that's okay, but you need to tell the 5th player that this is a thing. It needs to be conveyed. So is with every other homebrew rule for D&D, for Cyberpunk, or for whatever other fucking system you want to play. You need to convey the rules that you are playing with, not just the ones everyone can read up on, but the rules that are not written down in an official book. Yeah,
and I think you should also formulate them together, right? One of the things is, right, we said this a lot of times in this episode already, but kind of that the GM, it kind of gives the feeling that the GM is kind of just at the whim of the players. No, they are at some points, you're supposed to respect the people, but that's not the GM role being at the whim of player role. It's the person being respectful to another person. Like,
exactly.
It has nothing to do with your GM role. You are still allowed to also have your points, and your points should also be respected as a GM. You should also fill out your safety tool consent sheet for yourself, because you might also have triggers that you do not want to describe or read or write or whatever.
Yeah, and what you mentioned is in a session 0, I think the roles, in quotation marks, in a game aren't that important. You don't need to talk about that. Obviously, you need to know who's the GM and who is not. But in the discussion itself, no one is anyone special, but because everyone is important and special in its own right. They are all on the same stage. We're all on this. We need to find common ground, and then the roles in game in session 1 are: you are the GM, you are the players, but we are still playing a game together. So we need to have a common ground as equal.
Yeah, I think it's just this, especially with the homebrew rules, you just brought me to this point because it just fits. Because you as the GM should be able to say, these are my homebrew rules and I want them to be part of this game. Players, please read up on them and respect them. But at the same time, you should still have the discussion about them. But you are allowed to say, I want to play with this rule because, in my opinion, it improves the game, how I run it. And that is also important. But it's not just saying, I want this because I want this, but give a reason. Why do you want this specific homebrew rule? Because it fits the style you GM for this group. Perfect. Then people understand why it's there.
Exactly.
Right? For example, for one of my games, the rules on survival in the Outer Wilds are a little bit harder than usual. And I said that because there will be a lot of travel in this game, and I want you guys to feel like it is a challenge to be outside of cities. And my players were like, okay, we understand that. That's why we, for example, track ammunition and rations, which a lot of people just omit. That's completely fine. But for this game, it would make sense because there is a lot of travel, and I want it to be felt that travel sometimes has a strain on you to track these sort of things.
Exactly. And then I think another thing that just came up in my mind when you mentioned homebrew rules and the connection from homebrew rules to other things is homebrew rules, but outside of game. If you're playing in person, for example, the table etiquette to discuss how we all want to engage with each other and what things are allowed, what things shouldn't be part of the game at the table, and all of that stuff. Just most of the things are basic human interactions, but are still things that need to be discussed, because especially if you're a, let's say, thrown together group of people who don't interact with each other on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You need to know what is okay for everyone outside of the game.
One of the big things, for example, that I always think about when this is said is phone rules at the table.
Yeah.
I've been part of discussions that left a sour taste in my mouth, I'm not gonna lie, about why phones should be allowed at the table or shouldn't be allowed at the table. My stance is very simple. I don't give a fucking crap if you have your phone out or not. Some people have their character sheets on there, some people look up rules, some people message their friends while playing, or their family, or their boss. Some people play games on their phone, or whatever. You know what this all has in common? I don't give a crap why you use your phone. I want you to play the game with me. And if you're glued to your phone for 8 hours of the 8-hour session, yeah, that might be a problem. But having a no phone rule doesn't stop the inattention or the inattention by some people that are just channeled through the phone if they have their phone out at the table. Because having your phone out doesn't mean you're not interested in the game or not at paying attention. Some people need it to channel, or whatever you want to call it, their ADHD. Some people need to draw to do that. I have a player that draws sometimes, but they are still listening to the game playing. Some people do something with their fingers. And the thing is, I have no problem if your table has a no phone rule, because I can live with that. But a player that might need their phone for whatever reason might not have. You do not know why these people need their phones.
Exactly.
One of my players is basically on call. They have on-duty calls. And if they get called during game, they have to answer.
Exactly.
That's their job. And I cannot keep this person away from their fucking job just because they're playing a fantasy game.
Yeah, I think as long as you're still interested in the game and still play the game and not just sit there, I don't care what you do, as long as you're still playing with us and not sitting there while the others play, because then why are you here?
It's all about playing the game, and just because someone has a phone or a fidget toy or is looking through the room doesn't mean they're not playing. It means that their attention is currently somewhere else. But not even that, actually, because their attention might still be at the table, they just have to focus on something different right now.
Exactly.
Because looking at the same table for 4 hours can be exhausting.
And I get that every morning in university.
and the thing is, right, some people say, well, it's best for the people to not use their phone. It's good for them.
How do you know?
Who are you to decide that? But just to write these house rules. Eating at the table. What's next? Does someone have a peanut allergy? If someone at the table has a peanut allergy and you bring peanut M&Ms to the table, I will throw you out of the game in that instance, because you're not respecting that player. Sure, you might not know, but in the session 0, you can literally discuss that.
Exactly.
You have the time to discuss how to be at the table. Are we allowed to have our phones out? Sure, I don't give a crap if you have your phone out or not. That's where you have your character sheet and your dice, maybe. What's next am I allowed to bring? Does someone have a peanut allergy? Yes, I do. Okay, so no peanuts, no problem.
Yeah.
That's literally questions and answers. That is 30 seconds of discussion for just these 2 table rules. And they are the most prevalent, I think, that are good to discuss this. Obviously, there are maybe more important ones about showing up on time, because, for example, our group has someone that doesn't show up on time often. And while I obviously respect that, at some point it gets kind of annoying. So I don't necessarily have an incentive for coming on time or early, but obviously I say, I want you to be there on time. Please try. Or how do we deal with someone when someone is missing? What if a player cannot make the game? How do we deal with that? Do we take do we take the character out of the game, or does the GM control, or does the player control it? Whatever. But that's something that also can be discussed in a very, very simple manner. And these house rules shouldn't be omitted, even for online games. There are a lot of house rules that should be used. For example, I was part of a game once where it was actually also a streamed game of Call of Cthulhu, so that might also be different, but we had the session 0, and one of the players said, I'm not good with eating noises. So if you're eating, could you please mute yourself while we're playing or while we're discussing something? That is also a table rule. That is also a table discussion. That is also respectable, because eating noises are fucking awful.
Yeah, and
very easy.
Yeah, just talk about it. Like we always say, TTRPGs are a communication game. You need to communicate in every regards of the game, being it in-game stuff, out-of-game stuff, table rules, setting questions, safety tools, everything. You need to talk about it, and sometimes at length. And that's what a session 0 is for. A dedicated part of, or a dedicated time where you can talk about exactly these things to not hold up the game at a later point in time.
Yeah.
It's something you set aside for, I don't know, 2 to 4 hours to do the session 0, and then don't have that time distributed to all of the other times it might come up in the game. So you can tailor the game so you can have all fun, all play the whole time when you are meeting up to play the game and not discuss things.
A session 0 is housekeeping. It's all housekeeping.
But don't get me wrong, discussions are important, but that's what a session 0 is for, or an after session checkup, or in between character or in between arc session 0s are a thing as well. Whatever you want to call it, discussions are important, but there is a place and time for that. And especially before you start something, have a session 0 and a discussion for that campaign that you want to play.
Yeah, I think there's one last thing we need to discuss in the session 0, and that is probably the most hard-boiled thing. It's character creation. We don't have to talk about that a lot, because the game you're playing sets out the rules for doing so. You already discussed the themes and stuff you want to do, so it's very easy. Everyone has kind of an idea for a character probably already, so just create that. But I would suggest creating characters together, because it's very cool to discuss your characters with each other, to not necessarily get a good composition or party going, but just know what everyone else is playing.
Exactly.
To just get a feel for everyone. Kind of, okay, you are the tank, so I can be the damage dealer, right? In these very basic MMO terms. You don't have to do that, but you don't have to obviously not play what you want and just say, okay, well, I have to play healer then, because we have a tank and a damage dealer already. No, you can still play what you want, but just talking about it with each other can help in understanding what your role is for the party, because when you're playing a party, everyone kind of has a role. And if you do not have a role, it kind of feels awkward to be in the game, because everything you can do, someone else can do as well, or can do better even. And then you're kind of left, what am I supposed to do? That can be part of a skills or roles you make and basically be a hard-boiled rules thing, but can also be a role-play thing. I am the heart of the group. I am the glue that keeps the group together. That is also something that a role can do, but that's probably not something that is necessarily stated in the rules.
Exactly. But what I like to do regarding character creation is offer it to do it with my players at the end of session 0. But if something, for example, through the more detailed world description or whatever, throws some part of their character idea out of the window, then I obviously won't force them to come up with a new character concept right on the spot. If they want to talk about it, if they want to think about it, I'm always there. They can always shoot me a message, and then we can create characters after that together. But I still offer to create characters right after the hard-boiled discussion, let's say it like that, with all the important topics in quotation marks. After all of the things that we need to discuss is done, I set aside a certain amount of time to say, hey, we can create characters now if you want. If you don't want, that's totally fine as well.
Yeah.
That's usually the way I do it. Usually we create characters then together, but
Yeah, it's again about respecting everyone and making sure that everyone feels accommodated.
Exactly.
One thing I do after character creation, even though I said character creation is my last point, is I have some kind of character prelude. When I have a session 0, I already kind of know, because we decide on the game earlier on, I kind of know the beginning of the adventure or of the story or of the campaign. And I kind of just make a prelude. For example, with Cyberpunk, all the characters are runners or edge runners or fixers or whatever, right? They are contractors for hire. They are goons. They are mercenaries whatever you want to call it. So I just will go over with them after they've created their character. So what was your first job like to you? What did you spend your first money on? Where are you now before you get the next job, right?
Yeah.
Have a little bit of a feel for them so they can start thinking about these things, and I can incorporate it with their life path, which is something that Cyberpunk as a system does really well, this life path thing, but that's not necessarily for discussion here. Just generally, that can also be incorporated, and that's great. But having some kind of discussion about the character, or even with the character, if they want to answer in first person, is very good to understand the character a bit before we even start playing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think with that, we discussed session 0s. I don't have anything else coming to my mind what's important to talk about.
No, I think we've discussed basically session 0s in all their facets in the general sense. We probably omitted a few things, but that's just because of episode time. And yeah, I think we're basically, you can just send us off for today.
So then, as per usual, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDMPod, or you can visit our website at www.doubledm.com. We also have a Ko-Fi if you would like to check that out. And please, if you like the show, leave a rating on your favorite podcasting listening platform of your choice. It really helps the show out. And with that, thank you for listening. See you on the next one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.